money should be allocated. So Professor V asked me to speak about Islamophobia, and I wanted to take a different perspective on it because I'm pretty sure he's covered the psychology of it, but I wanted to do a more interdisciplinary study of it and look at it from a sociological standpoint, because unlike a very personal phobia that one person might have, there are very real social consequences to Islamophobia that affects us all, whether you're Muslim or you're not Muslim. So let's get started with the definition of Islamophobia. What do you guys think it is? Carlos?
Fear of anything, whether it's the Islam culture or anything, even the region or the,
What kind of fear?
Like hate almost? What type of fear? What do you mean?
What describes a phobia in particular?
What did we just talk about?
Irrational.
There
Yes.
we go.
Irrational fear of Islam or its culture or the religion or the people. Right, so very good. It's an irrational fear of Islam. And that's different from not liking Islam, that's different from not agreeing with the teachings of Islam, that's different from even questioning or criticizing Islam, right? It's an irrational fear. And in this case, the more research I did, the more I found out that it was based on misinformation, like a lot of fears, phobias are. They're based on one incident or misinformation that's given to you. And then as you get therapy or you get treatment, you realize, oh, it's really nothing to be afraid of. So the more research I did, I found out that Islamophobia was being used as a tool for political gain. So when I looked at the research, I found that hate crimes actually went up in number, not after a terrorist attack, but during an election year, like the current election year, or during the time of the Iraq War, when support was needed to justify a war that nowadays Americans think was unjustified. So it was around those times that we saw an increase in hate crimes against Muslims. So not after a terrorist attack, but during elections. So it seemed more so that Islamophobia was being used as a tool to manufacture votes, to manufacture support for political gains. And not just adults are affected by it, right? 42%, so almost a majority, 42% of Muslim families said that their kids were being bullied because of being Muslim. So kids are being affected by this. And this I found very interesting. 1 out of 4 of those bullying cases, guess who the bullier was, or the bully was? No, not a parent. What? No. It was within the school. The teacher. What? Good job, Carlos. You're on fire.
Yes, if the kid was being bullied, where exactly would it be at school? Because they spend most of the time.
Yeah. Thank you for following that logically. Yeah. So, 1 out of 4 cases, the bully was the teacher. Now I know you guys have the awesome Professor V who would never bully you guys, but yeah, this is going on in American schools, right? That 1 out of 4 kids. So do you see that Islamophobia, it doesn't matter who you are, right? You're being affected by it, right? You would think that a teacher would have better judgment. But this is one of those phobias that just has created so much misinformation that it's actually leading to very violent consequences for all of society, right? If a teacher is willing to bully a Muslim kid, they're willing to bully any kid, right? So a few other things I wanted to share. I know right now we've just been talking about how's it been affecting Muslims. So we talked about the hate crime towards Muslims, and we talked about the Muslim kids being bullied. But I want to use the analogy that the Muslims are just canaries in a coal mine. Do you guys know this analogy? No? Okay. Carlos?
Explain for us. I don't know.
Okay. So back in the day, in the coal mines, when they had workers in the coal mines, they didn't have the technology that we have now. And they would actually use canaries if they stopped tweeting. So does everybody know what a canary is, right? Like the Tweety bird? Oh. Okay, so they would have those in mines. When they noticed that they would stop tweeting, that's when they were dead, and it was because of the toxic air or the toxic gas in the mines. So that would alert all the humans, get out of the mine. So they would put the canaries at the bottom levels of the mine, and so as the gas traveled up, if you stop hearing the tweets of the bird, then you know, okay, there's toxic gas here. So they would alert all of the workers to leave the mine. Yeah, so I use that analogy because right now, or maybe it's just the Muslims being affected, but it creates a toxic environment for all of us. So how do you think the rest of us are affected if you're not a Muslim?
And the concept of a threat to justice anywhere
How so?
is that, like, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So
Very
if they go for the Muslims, then they're gonna start going for they're gonna scapegoat other ones until
Right.
no one to protect you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
Very good. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay. Yeah, so there was a Gallup study that found a huge, profound link between anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim. So people who identified as anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic, they were 32 times more likely to also be anti-Muslim. And so some people might say, okay, well, once a bigot is always a bigot, so they would bigot against any group. But that's not actually true. That's not what the study found. It found that that was the greatest predictor of being anti-Muslim, is if you were anti-Semitic as well. There was also another study that showed an 85% overlap between anti-Sharia law and all the other laws that are targeting discrimination against the minorities. So any legislation that discriminates a minority or women or workers or immigrants, so stuff like that. So they looked at both of those types of legislation and they found an 85% overlap. So at the basis of Islamophobia is fear, right? And a fear, like other phobias that I'm sure Professor Reed talked about, that fear is disproportionate to the threat that it poses. And like I said before, it's because of the misinformation, right? So I'll give you another example. Some people might argue that if you are tough on Islam, that it's a national security issue, that this is for the safety of the nation. But CNN recently did a special on terrorist recruiting, and they actually found that the terrorists were using video clips from the Republican debate, where Republican candidates were bashing Muslims. And they were using that to create further hate and to get people to join the terrorist group. So this was going on in Somalia, one of the terrorist groups there. So it's not about national security. It actually doesn't make any sense. Having Islamophobia actually strengthens our enemies. It doesn't strengthen our national security. And it also creates a psychological space where people, Americans, Muslim Americans, feel alienated. And it's easier for recruiters to feed off of that, right? So the same way that people get recruited, usually kids get recruited for sex trafficking online, is that you turn them against your parent, or I know nobody understands you when you come over here, I love you, stuff like that, you know, where they feed off of your insecurities to then exploit you. And that's exactly what terrorist recruiters do. And they're doing that based off of Islamophobia.
What's the end goal of that specific target?
I'm sorry, could you
What's the
repeat?
end goal of that specific target? Is it to gain power? What is it?
The recruiters, it's to recruit more people to,
The cause?
right,
What is the
to do
cause?
more terrorist attacks.
To do more harm.
Yeah,
That's nice.
yeah. So they're exploiting the people that we alienate because of Islamophobia. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just trying to gauge why. So,
Yeah, to further their cause, right? To further the hate.
so it's good.
I have like 5 minutes. I'm almost done. Okay, so what exactly does fear do to us? If I may get interdisciplinary again, it actually kills our freedom, because there's a lot of research that neuroscience research that on a neurological level, fear will make us more accepting to conformity, to authoritarianism, and to prejudice. The three things that erode our foundation for democracy, right? So I'm reminded of this quote by Dr. Martin Luther King, whose legacy we celebrate this month and last month. He said that the hope of a civilized, livable society lies with a disciplined nonconformist who is dedicated to justice, peace, and brotherhood, right? So exactly the opposite of what we want in a free society. So what do you do about this? What do you do about Islamophobia?
Get informed.
Somebody else.
Try to change people's views.
Yeah. So the same way, and get informed, the same way that you would counteract any of the other phobias is the same thing you have to do with Islamophobia, right? Get rid of the misinformation.
Exposure.
Exposure
To other Muslims. Okay, we are.
like me.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like he said, right? One of the things that I picked up on from one of his lectures was that when doing therapy for phobias, you don't focus on directly what it is that's in this current moment, right?
Mhm.
You go back to when did you develop this phobia? Where did it come from, right? So it's the same thing with Islamophobia. Let's look at where is this misinformation coming from, right? And I found that over the past 25 years, New York Times has portrayed Islam more negatively than cancer and cocaine. So this has been going on for a long time. I guess now we have a word for it, Islamophobia. And then also I found that 90% of the coverage of Islam in the media is negative, whereas only 72% of the coverage of North Korea is negative. North Korea, who is supposedly a designated terrorist state by the government, only 72% of that is negative coverage. But 90%, almost 100% of the coverage on Islam is negative.
It's an agenda, right?
Right, for political gain, yeah. So like I said, get involved, gradual exposure, do something about it.
And just get informed.
Right.
Just get informed.
And so I'm just gonna go over a few stats real quickly. In America, Muslims only make up 1%, so they would have you believe we're like 30% or 50%, but we're just 1% of the population. And we don't have one race that makes up Muslim. There's not a majority race. It's a minority population. It's a bunch of minority populations. So Muslims are not just all black or white or Arab. It's minority races. They're also the youngest faith community by so far. So the average age of the Muslim is a lot younger than any other religion.
What is the age?
In the 20s. Yeah. So, and because of that, they're also the most likely to be employed, also the most likely to be paying taxes. Muslim women, more likely than Muslim men, are to be educated, college graduates. And then just to look at a quick case study that they did in Michigan, which Michigan has almost like a 3% Muslim population. And of that 3% Muslim population, 15% of them are doctors. They create 100,000 jobs in that industry, in Michigan. They contribute $166 million in charity, which is 16% more than the average household. They contribute $5.5 billion to the economy, which is 18% more than the average household. And they are 20% more likely to say that it is not okay to target civilians to justify a political cause. And they're also more likely to reject terrorism. Because the biggest victims of terrorism are Muslims. Because a lot of terrorists attack their own home country, right, where the Muslims are living. So it's in the best interest of Muslims to actually fight against terrorism. So I just barely scratched the surface. I encourage you guys to get more informed at the Institute for Social and Policy Understanding. It's online. All right, sorry.
There's a really great movie called My Name is Khan. It talks about that.
And autism.
I'm sorry?
It's about autism also.
Yeah, and autism. Yeah, but also about Islamophobia.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, watch.
Institute
My name
for
is
what?
Sarah. It's called Institute for Social and Policy Understanding, and they have a section on Islamophobia, but all of this research plus more that I was talking about. Okay, thank you guys. You've been a great audience.
Thank you.